I knew something was wrong the second I turned into the parking lot because the space under that old sycamore tree looked naked. That's the only word for it. Empty asphalt, one dark oil stain, a couple dead leaves blowing around like some sad little Western movie scene, and my truck, gone. My 1998 Chevy Silverado wasn't exactly hard to spot either. Faded red paint, one dent on the passenger door, fishing stickers on the back window, the kind of truck that looked like it survived 3 divorces and a tornado. I'd parked that thing in the exact same spot for almost 4 years outside my apartment complex in Mesa Ridge, Tennessee, and suddenly it vanished over one weekend like the earth swallowed it whole. At first, I honestly thought it got stolen. My stomach dropped so hard I could feel it in my knees because that truck wasn't just transportation to me. It was history. My dad taught me how to drive in that truck. I hauled furniture in it, camped in it, slept in it after my breakup in 2021. Hell, I probably spent more time inside that Silverado than most people spend talking to their own family. So yeah, I panicked. Then I noticed the sign. Bright yellow, bolted into fresh concrete right beside the curb like somebody installed it 5 minutes ago. Reserved parking. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. And I just stood there staring at it thinking, wait a second. That sign wasn't there Friday morning. I know it wasn't there because I backed my truck into that spot before leaving town and almost clipped the damn curb. There was no sign, no paint markings, nothing, which meant somebody put that thing up while I was gone and somehow decided my truck qualified as unauthorized overnight. That's when the anger started kicking in. Not explosive anger, not screaming anger, the dangerous kind, the quiet kind, the kind where your brain suddenly gets very, very focused. So I went upstairs, dropped my bags inside my apartment, grabbed a bottle of water, sat at my kitchen table, and started making calls. Took me almost an hour to get a straight answer because everybody suddenly became allergic to responsibility. The leasing office blamed the HOA. The HOA blamed new parking enforcement policy. Parking enforcement blamed a contractor. The contractor gave me the number for some towing company called Dominion Asset Recovery, which already sounded like a company run by comic book villains. I called them, and this woman answered with the coldest voice I've ever heard in my life, like she smoked cigarettes dipped in battery acid. I gave her my plate number, and she goes, "Yep, vehicle's here." Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no hesitation. Then she hits me with the number. "Your total due is $3,840. Cash only." I actually laughed because I thought she misspoke. I said, "You mean 300?" She goes, "No, sir, 38.40. Additional storage fees begin tomorrow at $70 per day." You ever hear something so ridiculous your brain just freezes for a second? That was me. I was sitting there holding my phone away from my ear like maybe the thing malfunctioned. Nearly $4,000 to release an old pickup truck worth maybe 6 on a good day. And the worst part? They knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't about parking. It wasn't about rules. It was pressure. Psychological pressure. They count on regular people panicking, paying, and moving on because fighting back feels exhausting. That's the business model. I drove out to their impound yard that same afternoon, 30 minutes outside town behind an industrial strip full of chain-link fences and stray dogs barking at nothing. The place looked less like a towing company and more like a hostage camp for vehicles. Rows and rows of cars sitting behind razor wire fences baking under the Tennessee heat, while desperate people stood in line holding cash envelopes. And the guy at the front desk. Man, this dude looked exactly how you'd imagine. Slicked back gray hair, gold chain, tucked in polo shirt stretched tight over his stomach, smiling like he enjoyed watching people suffer. He slid the paperwork toward me and said, "You HOA folks are keeping us busy lately." That sentence stuck in my head. HOA folks, meaning this wasn't random. This was coordinated. Somebody in that neighborhood wanted these tows happening. I paid the money, grabbed my receipt, got back into my truck, and before I even started the engine, I remember sitting there gripping the steering while thinking one very simple thing. You people just made a huge mistake. Now let me pause the story for a second because this is where a lot of people get played, and honestly, HOA boards and predatory towing companies know most residents never look past the initial panic. According to standard procedure, a towing company is supposed to operate under very specific notice requirements, especially when the vehicle belongs to an actual resident and not some abandoned car with flat tires growing weeds underneath it. But here's the trick. Most people hear words like HOA policy or parking enforcement and immediately assume those people have unlimited authority. They don't. Not even close. From a legal perspective, an HOA is basically a contract organization. Their power only exists inside the boundaries of the agreement you signed. If the lease or community bylaws don't explicitly give them authority to tow resident vehicles under certain conditions, then they can't just freestyle new rules over a weekend because some board member suddenly decides he wants to feel important. And trust me, there's always one guy on these HOA boards who treats neighborhood parking like he's defending the Pentagon. But the bigger thing happening here was psychological. This is a psychological trap companies use all the time. Create urgency, inflate consequences, overwhelm people with fees, and make fighting back feel more expensive than surrendering. They expect you to think, man, I just want my car back. That emotional exhaustion is where they make their money. The lesson here is simple. Whenever somebody in authority suddenly demands fast cash while hiding behind policy, slow down and read everything. Because people abusing power absolutely hate one type of person, the calm person with paperwork. So that night, after I got my truck back and parked it right back under that same sycamore tree out of pure spite, I walked upstairs, dropped the towing receipt on my kitchen counter, opened a beer, and started reading. Not social media posts, not angry Yelp reviews, actual documents. My apartment lease, HOA bylaws, county towing regulations, state enforcement codes, all of it. And the deeper I dug, the uglier the whole thing started looking. First thing I noticed? My lease never once transferred parking authority to the HOA board. In fact, buried halfway through page 17 under resident use rights, there was a clause basically guaranteeing tenants unrestricted use of designated residential parking unless emergency maintenance or safety hazards were involved. Meaning unless my Silverado suddenly transformed into a flaming biohazard over the weekend, they had no contractual basis to tow it. That alone made me suspicious. But then I kept going. Next morning, I took off work and drove downtown to the county records office because I wanted to know exactly who I was dealing with. And man, Dominion Asset Recovery already had a reputation. 2 prior citations for unlawful towing practices. 1 pending civil complaint involving forged authorization forms. Multiple consumer reports claiming vehicles were removed before signage deadlines expired. At that point, the whole thing stopped feeling like some misunderstanding and started feeling like a business operation designed around intimidation. Then I found the real jackpot. Tennessee State Code required newly installed towing enforcement signage to remain visible for a minimum notification period before enforcement could legally begin. 7 days. 7 full days. I sat there rereading the statute 3 times because I almost couldn't believe they'd been that sloppy. The sign near my parking spot had fresh concrete around the base Saturday morning. Fresh. Which meant somebody installed it Friday night at the earliest. My truck got towed less than 12 hours later. Illegal. Completely illegal. And here's where things got interesting. Because once I realized they broke the law, I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking strategically. Most people make one mistake when they get screwed over. They get emotional too fast. They yell, threaten lawsuits immediately, post Facebook rants nobody important reads. But pressure works best when applied slowly, quietly, like tightening a vice. So instead of storming into the leasing office acting crazy, I started building leverage. I photographed the sign. I time-stamped the concrete. I requested installation records from maintenance vendors. I printed state statutes. I copied every towing receipt and highlighted every fee. Then I filed complaints. 1 with the County Transportation Office. 1 with the State Consumer Protection Division. 1 with the Attorney General's fraud portal. And because I'm petty in a very organized way, I also emailed a local investigative news reporter who'd previously done stories about predatory towing in Nashville. By Tuesday evening, I had a folder nearly 2 inches thick sitting on my kitchen table. That same Tuesday happened to be HOA board meeting night. Now, normally, those meetings were sleepy little gatherings full of retirees arguing about mailbox paint colors and lawn edging. But not this one. I walked into that clubhouse carrying my folder under one arm, boots still dusty from work, and every head in the room turned toward me like somebody just brought a shotgun into church. At the front sat Randall Pike, HOA president. Randall was one of those guys who looked aggressively wealthy in a middle management kind of way. Perfect white teeth, navy blazer, Expensive watch he made sure everybody noticed. Hair slicked back so hard it looked laminated. He always walked around the complex like he personally founded civilization. And Randall hated my truck. I realized that almost immediately. See, about 6 months earlier he'd made some passive-aggressive comment during a parking lot inspection about maintaining upscale visual standards. Translation? He thought my old Silverado made the neighborhood look poor. That was the real motivation behind all this. Not parking shortages. Not safety concerns. Ego. Randall wanted the complex to look expensive, and my truck offended his fake luxury fantasy. Soon as he saw me enter, his expression tightened. "This meeting is for residents on the agenda," he said, not even trying to hide the annoyance in his voice. I smiled and kept walking. "Perfect," I told him, dropping my folder onto the conference table hard enough to make one lady spill her coffee, because what I brought is for lawyers. Dead silence. Randall tried that smug little HOA smile people use when they think procedure protects them. "Sir, if you have a complaint, you can submit it through the appropriate channels." And man, that line right there told me everything. People hiding behind systems always think systems move slowly enough to protect them. What Randall didn't understand was I'd already moved faster. I opened the folder and started laying documents across the table one by one. Lease agreement, state code printouts, citation records, complaint confirmations, photos of the newly installed sign, tow timestamps, fee breakdowns. Every piece lined up neatly like evidence in a murder trial. One of the older board members picked up the state statute, and her face changed instantly. That's when the room shifted. You could feel it. Suddenly, this wasn't some angry tenant whining about parking anymore. This was liability. Real liability. "According to state notification requirements," I said calmly, "your enforcement signage was illegal at the time my vehicle was removed." Randall interrupted immediately. "Dominion handles enforcement independently." "Wrong," I said. "You authorized the tow request." He opened his mouth again, and I cut him off before he could regain control. "And before anybody here says another word, understand this. Complaints have already been filed with the Attorney General, County Transportation Office, and Consumer Protection Bureau. A local news investigator also has copies of everything in this folder." You want to know the craziest part? Randall's confidence didn't disappear all at once. It cracked slowly, like ice under pressure. First, the smile vanished. Then his posture changed. Then he stopped making eye contact. Because for the first time, he realized this situation existed outside his little HOA kingdom. This wasn't some resident he could fine over trash cans anymore. This was exposure. Financial exposure. Public exposure. The board members started turning on each other almost immediately. One woman asked who approved the signage timeline. Another asked whether legal counsel reviewed the towing contract. Somebody else muttered, "I thought Dominion said this was compliant." And Randall, beautiful, glorious Randall, started sweating through his collar while trying to talk about community standards. That's when I leaned forward and said the sentence that basically ended the meeting. "This isn't community standards," I told him quietly. "It's organized theft wearing a polo shirt." Nobody spoke after that. The meeting adjourned less than 5 minutes later. Wednesday morning, my phone started ringing around 8 a.m. First, it was the HOA's legal representative asking if we could resolve the misunderstanding privately. Then the property management company called saying they were reviewing procedural concerns. Then Dominion Asset Recovery called pretending they wanted to clarify fee structures. Funny how polite everybody becomes once paperwork enters the room. But I wasn't interested in apologies anymore. See, by then I understood something important. They didn't just tow my truck. They built a system counting on residents being too intimidated or exhausted to fight back. Which meant if I settled quietly for a refund, they'd just keep doing it to somebody else next month. So I pushed harder. I rejected the first settlement offer immediately. Full refund plus towing reimbursement? Nope. Second offer included reasonable damages. Still no. By Thursday afternoon, they finally asked what it would take to make the issue disappear. That was my favorite phone call. I remember standing on my balcony watching traffic while Randall's lawyer tried sounding calm over speakerphone. "Mr. Mercer," he said carefully, "what resolution are you seeking?" I already knew my answer. "First," I said, "I want financial compensation for unlawful impoundment at a daily rate matching your own storage penalties." Silence. Second, Dominion's towing contract gets terminated immediately. Longer silence. Third, written policy changes guaranteeing no resident vehicle can be removed without documented notice periods and direct property verification. The lawyer sighed so deeply I thought his soul left his body. That's substantial. So was my towing bill. Thursday night turned into a feeding frenzy behind closed doors because by Friday afternoon, they folded completely. Every demand. Signed. Approved. Done. I walked into the property management office around 4 p.m. and they handed me a settlement check for $9,500. Randall wasn't there. Apparently, he'd taken an unexpected personal leave. Sure he did. Dominion Asset Recovery lost the HOA contract before the end of the month, and once local reporters started sniffing around, other properties quietly started cutting ties too. Turns out my situation wasn't unique. Not even close. Within 6 months, Dominion shut down operations across 3 counties after multiple investigations uncovered illegal towing patterns almost identical to mine. And every now and then, when I pull my old Silverado back into that same parking spot under the sycamore tree, I still laugh a little because nobody says a damn word anymore. Not Randall. Not the HOA. Nobody. Funny how quiet power gets once somebody finally calls its bluff. You know what the weirdest part of this whole thing was? It was never really about the truck. I mean, sure, at the time it felt personal because somebody took something that belonged to me and tried to squeeze me for money, but looking back now, the Silverado was just the trigger. The real story was about power. Tiny little pockets of unchecked power that grow inside places people stop paying attention to. HOAs, towing contractors, management companies. A lot of them start out with reasonable purposes, keeping neighborhoods clean, organizing maintenance, handling parking disputes. But every now and then, somebody gets a taste for control and starts treating policy like a weapon instead of a responsibility. And the scary part is how often it works. Most regular people are busy. They've got jobs, kids, bills, health problems, exhausted brains. So when some official-looking person throws a fine or a towing notice in front of them, they assume resistance is hopeless. That's exactly what these systems count on. Compliance through fatigue. According to standard procedure, authority always sounds bigger than it really is when nobody questions it. That's why paperwork matters. Documentation matters. Matters. From a legal perspective, the moment emotions take over completely, you usually lose leverage. And trust me, I understand the temptation to explode because the first thing I wanted to do was drive that Silverado straight through the HOA office windows. But that would have made me the problem. Staying patient made them the problem. Huge difference. This is a psychological trap people fall into every day, believing confidence equals legitimacy. It doesn't. Some of the loudest people in positions of authority are secretly terrified somebody informed will challenge them. Randall acted untouchable right up until the second actual evidence landed on the table. Then suddenly the king of the neighborhood looked like a guy trying not to throw up during a tax audit. The lesson here is simple. If something feels shady, slow the situation down. Read the contract. Learn the rules better than the people enforcing them. Because the truth is, a lot of these systems survive on intimidation, not legality. And honestly, I think that's why this story hit so many people online after it spread around town. Everybody's dealt with some version of this before. Maybe not an HOA, maybe not a tow truck, but some arrogant little gatekeeper who thought nobody would push back. So now I want to ask you guys something. If this happened to you, would you have fought it, or would you have just paid the fee and moved on? And have you ever dealt with an HOA or company that abused its authority like this? Drop your story in the comments because I promise you, some of these are crazier than mine. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, hit like and subscribe, because apparently upsetting corrupt towing companies is becoming a hobby of mine now.